Welcome to Excel Magic Trick number 970. If you want to download this workbook, click on the link below the video. In this video, we have a data set, and the last column of the data set has numbers, and we need to extract the records where the numbers are divisible by 5. Now we're going to see 5 methods. Filter with a helper column, advanced filter with a formula for criteria, a helper column formula, and then 2 array formulas for extracting records from a data set. All right, so filter. Well, I don't know how to use the built-in filter to get at a number that's divisible by 5, but I can think of a way to add a helper column and use a formula that'll deliver true or false. Now I'm going to use the mod function. Mod function is great because it can take a number and then divide by some other number. Now I'm going to lock this because I'm going to copy this down. And what does mod do? It tells you the remainder. So what's 85 divided by 5? What's the remainder? 0. So we always want a formula result. Control Enter, double click and send it down. That's 0. Now right now you could filter this. I'm going to go to Home, either over here to Filter, or I should have just gone here, or just use the keyboard shortcut Ctrl Shift L. All right, so now we can simply come down here, unselect everything, select 0, click OK. Now we have just the records we want. Copy and then paste it somewhere else, right? So those are the records where the numbers in the last column are divisible by 5. Now I'm going to unfilter this. Sometimes maybe you, for whatever reason, you don't want zeros and a bunch of numbers. You want to see true or false. Not only that, but we're going to, in just a moment, do a formula for advanced filter where we actually need a true. All right, so check this out. What can we do? Well, we have columns of zeros and non-zero numbers. Any logical function, whether it's the if function or and or not, will interpret 0 as false and any non-zero number as true. So I'm simply going to, remember, I'm interested in 0. Well, Excel interprets that as false. No problem. There's a function called not. And what does not do? It turns true to false and false to true. Now remember, Excel interprets 0 as false and any non-zero number as true. So these numbers will become false and the zeros become true. Control Enter, double click and send it down. Now you can filter and just select the trues, right? And then copy and paste. Now let's go use a similar formula here. Let me actually undo the, clear the filter. I'm going to use a similar formula, but we're going to use advanced filter. Now what do we have to do for filter? We added a helper column and that column's sitting there. But sometimes you don't want that. No problem. We can still use the formula and use an advanced filter. It'll be as if there's a helper column, but it won't be in the cells. Let's go over to the sheet advanced filter. All right, so here's the weird thing about advanced filter. Advanced filter is up on data advanced here. Now we're going to need a criteria range, and I'm going to click escape here. Now what you usually do is you do something like you paste the field name and then the criteria, and that tells advanced filter what you want in this column. But when you're using a formula for criteria, you have to have an empty cell above the formula. All right, so watch this. I'm going to do the same exact formula, mod of this divided by this, F4. Now remember, advanced filter will treat this cell as if it's in a column next to it in this cell, and then you copy down, but it'll never do that. Advanced filter will do it all in memory. Now, I could use the not, but just to show you that there's another way, what are we interested in? We're interested in the remainder 0. So you could, instead of using not, just use equals 0. True. All right, here we go. This is so weird. Criteria, no field name. Be sure that's empty. Now we click a single cell, go up to Data Advanced Filter. Our data set, I'm going to say copy to another location. Criteria range, empty cell and true false formula, and then copy to, I'm going to put it somewhere like right here, and then click OK. And just like that, we get our records. All right, so advanced filter, you can use true, false formulas. It treats it. Remember, if we had it here and copied it down, it would be as if it's in a column, but advanced filter does that in memory. Be sure to have an empty cell. Let's go to our next, our third example, helper column for a formula. Now, you could always do a big array formula to extract records, and we'll do two of them in our last two examples. But you know, oftentimes you can avoid array formulas with a helper column. Well, okay, let's just start off with our mod. Remember, we're going to have some formulas over here, and this helper column will help us determine just the ones that we're interested in. We'll do the same thing here. I'm going to hit F4. All right, and I'm going to do equals 0.
True.
Double click and send it. Okay, well, that's not going to help because when you're extracting with formulas, anytime you have duplicates, like we have these duplicate trues here, you're going to have to switch to some array formula. Well, I want to convert this to numbers, just 1, 2, 3, 4. And so we can create a formula over here that just looks at 1, 2, 3, 4 and extracts 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, check this out. I'm going to use this. Well, first off, how do we convert trues and falses to ones and zeros? Any math operation, including the sum function. Let's just see if this is true. Control N. Oh, you got to be kidding. Now, lots of times we see trues and false with double negative or plus 0, but you can use the sum function. Why did I use the sum function? Because I have just our mod or our logical formula in the number 1, but now I'm going to type a comma and say also add the one above. Now I could use this just a plus and use the one above, but the cool thing about the sum function is it ignores text. So in this particular example, it'll ignore the word size. If we did this particular formula element plus this cell, we'd get a value error because directly adding can't add a number and a text and a number, but sum function can because it'll ignore it. All right, so you ready? Double click and send it down. Oh, look at that. We have a 1, a 2. The first instance of each number tells us that's the trigger for us to extract that record. Now, here's the cool thing. A regular lookup function like VLOOKUP or index or match, if you do exact match, it'll ignore duplicates and take only the first one. So I'm going to come over here and use the index function. All right, what am I trying to extract? Date and then size. So I'm going to highlight this whole column and hit the F4 key once and twice. When I copy down here, I need to be locked on 2, but when I move over, I want the A to move to B, so that'll work fine. Comma, the row number. Well, I'm interested in, for this data set, the first one is in row 1, the first 2 is in row 3, etc. So I'm going to use the match function. Match will tell me the relative position of an item in a list. Now, match is a typical lookup function. So if I tell match to look up the number 1, it'll report that the number 1 here is in the first row, and it will ignore these. If I tell the match function lookup value to look up the number 2, it'll report that it's in the 4th row because it's the 4th item in this data set, and it will ignore all the other 2s. So what I need as I copy this formula down is a lookup value that'll change from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. So no problem, I can use the rows function. And I'm sitting in cell E5, so I'm going to type $5 E5. What this does is the row function to ask the question, how many rows are there from 5 to 5? Well, there's 1. But because I've locked it there and not there, this is an expandable range. So when I get down to this row, it'll be 5 to 6. And rows will report how many rows are there from 5 to 6? 2. So this increments, this little piece here increments numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 as we copy it down. Perfect for our lookup value. All right, lookup array. F4 to lock it, and then the trick for ignoring duplicates is to use exact match 0. You got to be kidding me. So match. There's just this little part right here will give us 1, 2, 3, 4 as we copy down. All right, you ready? Close parentheses, Ctrl Enter, copy it over, and then copy it down. Look at that, just like that. And you can see, for example, here, what has it done? If I look at this match right here, 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually, let's look at this little piece here. F9. Oh, it's a 4. Match is looking up a 4. It's going to find the 4 there, so it extracts parcel 9 and 25. I'm going to click Escape. Now let's get rid of these NAs. In 2007 and later, we can use the if error. All right. If error is great, it takes that whole value right there. And if it happens to evaluate to an error, comma, you tell it what you want to see. Double quote, a null text string to show nothing. Ctrl Enter, copy it over, and double click and send it down. Oh, wow. Totally amazing. Now let's go over to our next sheet. Notice here we have a helper column. But what if you absolutely couldn't have a helper column and you just wanted this? Then we come over here. Now again, filter, advanced filter, and then when we switch to formulas, the reason that we would switch to formulas is that we had, or the advantage to formulas is that they update automatically. So if I was to change this to 84, right, our formulas absolutely immediately update. And so that's a lot of times why people like formulas, Control Z. All right, helper column. Extracting formulas here. Let's go over to this sheet and look at an array formula. All right, so I'm clicking on the sheet Formula 2003 and 7 using small. Now this formula setup will work in 2003 and 7, and then we'll see another little bit easier formula we can use, array formula, in 2010. All right, so we don't have a helper column, so we're going to have to build it all in our formula here. All right, well, I'm going to start with the index, just like we did over there. And I'm going to highlight this column and hit the F4 and lock just the row, not the column. And then comma. Well, we need a row number. Well, get this. We're going to have to actually simulate that entire helper column and the correct row number all in this one argument. And how are we going to do that? We're going to do that with the small function. Small is going to allow us, as we copy down, to find the 1, and then 4, and then looks like 7, right? So we're going to create in this array right here an array of row numbers. All right, you ready? This is going to get wild. If logical test, I'm going to use the mod function. Remember, we're trying to get divide by 5 equals 0, so I'm going to highlight the entire column, hit F4, comma, and then the divisor is this right here. And again, I'm going to hit F4. Now let's just see what this gives us inside our logical test. Actually, I love this new trick. You click there and it highlights it, and you can hit F9. Oh, that's in essence, that's our whole helper column that we had in our last example, except for now it's in the formula. So what are we going to say? Control Z anytime that's equal to 0. Now that's a logic. Oh, I got to use this new trick. Boop. And so now I can hit the F9 and see it gives me trues and falses. Well, that's going to help, but what do I really want? What does small need? It needs a bunch of row numbers. So the first part, logical test, is a bunch of trues and falses. Now I do value of true. Well, I need a bunch of row numbers. So I'm going to go to the row of these, F4. That's going to give me 2, 3, 4, and I don't want that. I want 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to subtract row of that. And then F4, that gives me 2 minus 2 is 0, and I don't want that, so I add 1 back in. All right, so this whole value, if true right here, if I hit the F9 key, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, absolutely amazing. And that's totally dynamic. If we move this data set, or if we insert new rows, anything, that array of row numbers for this particular data set will always be correct. I'm going to Control Z. Now, we do not need the value of false, so we just close this off. Now, we can highlight this if and hit the F9 key. Oh, golly, I just keep, let's do this. Boop. And hit the F9 key, and there it is. We have an array of exactly the row numbers we want. That's what our goal was to put into small. All right, the falses will be ignored. I'm going to Control Z. Now, as I copy the formula down, I need row 1 and then 4, so I'm going to comma, and the K is give me either the first or second or third smallest. So we're going to use our row number incrementer. I'm in E5, so I'm going to type $5 E5. This will give us 1, 2, 3, 4 as we copy down. Close parenthesis on the small. All of that just to get the right row number. You got to be kidding me. Now, this is an array formula. In the logical test argument here, that delivers more than one true or false, because that's an array, and the function itself cannot handle array calculations. You have to force it to do an array calculation with a special keystroke. Now, I'm going to close this index off. So now we have this. You have to do not just enter, because then you get a value. If I copy this down, I get a bunch of junk. And the reason why is you didn't properly tell, and here's the keyboard shortcut. You got to tell this formula to do Ctrl Shift and Enter. Boy, that was a long way to say please do Ctrl Shift Enter. Not only do you have to do Ctrl Shift Enter, but if you look up here, those curly brackets, that's Excel telling you, oh, okay, I understood you're doing an array formula. Those curly brackets cannot be typed in. That comes from Ctrl Shift Enter. You tell Excel to do an array calculation with Ctrl Shift Enter. It tells you that it understood with curly brackets. All right, so there's no if error, so we're going to actually have to count how many of these numbers are divisible by 5. So equals, and we're going to have to do, actually watch this. I'm going to steal this. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to use this. Copy, escape, equals Control V. Remember, that delivers a bunch of trues and falses. We need to count just the trues. So I'm going to use the sum product. Sum product, why sum product? Why not just throw that in COUNTIF and tell it to do COUNTIF true? Because COUNTIF can't handle that array calculation, but sum product can. Now I need to convert the trues and falses to ones and zeros, so I'm going to use any math operation, or here I'm going to use a double negative. That's a fast calculating method. So I'm going to close parentheses. Now if I highlight this, actually I keep forgetting. Boop. That's a new trick I just learned from someone at YouTube. And if I hit F9, boom, that gives us our ones and zeros. Sum product will add the ones and get exactly the right count. All right, so you ready? Control Enter 6. Now we have to amend this formula and say, I'm going to steal this too because I'm going to use it. Equals if rows is greater than this count of 6, F4. Then what do we want? If we get past 6, the value, if true, is double quotes. Null text string to show nothing, comma. And the value of false, that big, huge thing right there. All right, Control Shift Enter. Copy it over and double click and send it down. Now, we want to go over and see how to do slight variation on this formula in 2010. But I don't want to have to retype a bunch of stuff we're going to use. So I'm actually going to copy this mod part right here. Control CC. I cleared if your board isn't cleared, go ahead and clear it, and then we'll collect together these pieces. I'm going to collect together the row part that generates the row numbers, Control C, and then also this number incrementer, the rows, Control C. Now, notice our formula here, might as well do this too. That's the index part. In the index, this row number part, that entire thing is the small function with some criteria to get row numbers. Now in 2010, there's something called the aggregate function. And aggregate function lets you choose which function you want to do. And if we tell aggregate to do small, we could take advantage of the fact that the aggregate doesn't require Control Shift Enter. All right, so ready? I'm going to click Escape and come over to this sheet right here. All right, so I'm going to say equals and click on this index. And right here, that row number is where we did small, but now we're going to do aggregate. And aggregate asks us, there's a bunch of functions. We want 15 for small, comma, the options part of it is allows us to do a bunch of things, and we want to ignore errors because the array of row numbers we're going to get are going to have some divide by 0 errors. So I'm going to say 6, and then comma, this array. This is where we're going to build our row numbers. All right? I'm going to take open parentheses and then put my row numbers in. Now, with the small and if, we put the condition first and then the row numbers. But in this aggregate example, you put the row numbers first, and then you divide by the condition. Right? And so I'm going to divide by this mod. All right, so now check this out. If I click this array and hit the F9 key, what does it give me? Oh, look, it's similar to what we saw over there. Over there we saw 1 and then falses and a 4. But here we got the divide by 0. No problem. That 6 will ignore those divide by 0. So I'm going to Control Z. And then comma. Oh, there's that K again. So now I'm going to do rows. All right? So this whole aggregate right here. Whoop. If I hit the F9, all it's doing is delivering a row number just like small. Control Z. Close parentheses, Control Enter, copy it over and down. All right, and then you can come here and see if we go inside of our index and click that row number and hit F9, sure enough, it got 10, right? Because this record is in the 10th row. Control Z. Now 75. All we have to do is add an if error. So I'm going to add if error. Remember, this is 2010. Aggregates in 2010. If error came in 2007. All right, comma, and what do I want to show? Null text string. Double quote, that'll show a blank. Control Enter. Copy it over and down. All right, that is a lot. Look at that. I didn't have to Control Shift Enter. Just flat out worked. And again, the advantage of formulas is if you change the data, your formula updates. Control Z. So we saw aggregate 2010. We saw this small function for 2003 and 7. We saw an awesome helper function, a helper column that'll work in any version for a formula. Advanced filter with that true-false logical formula. And the first one, the filter with a helper column. All right, we'll see you next trick.